thanks for taking the time to do this. I mean, I don't really have a sort of a clear like, oh, this is like how I'd want to like structure a conversation. This is exactly what I want to do with it. But I've been keen to kind of chat to you for a while on this because I mean, I think we first started chatting around when you had your FTCA, the six-figure associate presentation you did, which was a year or two ago, I think.
I think that's been 2 years ago. I think that was back in two. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just like it's great seeing somebody putting out like, here's a way to be really successful and have what you want and enjoy a great, career as an associate. Not that you have to stay that way, obviously, but I think I don't know how it is in the US, but certainly here in the UK and Europe, there's a lot of people graduating, working as an associate, but in a real rush to kind of like be their own business owner and be their own clinic owner. And even then, there's a real rush to succeed. Like I've had chats with all of my team about how, they've been here 6 months and they're not mega successful. It's like, yeah, you've been here 6 months. Like it takes that time. And I think it's probably a cultural thing, but I feel like there's a general sense of impatience for a lot of people to like get where they want to be right now. And I've seen it kind of sabotage things a little bit between clinic owners and associates as well. Like the associate feels they're not what they want to be, and it's the clinic isn't giving them what they need, and the clinic owner feels like the associate is impatient, and then words like entitled start to get thrown around on both sides, and it can kind of spiral from there. I don't know if how that is in the US, or certainly with docs that you're in contact with. Is that something that you're seeing as well? This kind of like increased friction between clinic owners and associates?
I would say so. I think by and large, there are a handful of really good positions out there. But yeah, I think that's either some people try to come out and start right out of school and they just don't. They need to start their practice and they burn out, or they come out and they work for someone who, lack of a better phrase, or like slave drivers, where they overwork the associates and they do underpay them, and they get frustrated, and like you said, on the other end of the spectrum, we have some students who come out of school and expect more, or are even informed that they may be making more or doing better right out of school than the reality really has set up for them. So I had that issue with a couple of my first associate positions. Yeah, this one's worked out really well, the one that I'm currently in now.
I mean, I think what might be useful as well, if you kind of like just sort of talk us through like your chiropractic story a little bit, like how it was when you were at uni, what you were expecting, what it was like when you graduated, those first couple of positions. Like, what was that like for you?
Well, luckily I had made some connections when I was in school. I went and did it was back then it was called NCLC. It was the big chiropractic convention that we have up in DC every year, and there's a lot of good continuing education seminars up there. There's also a good chance to just network and connect with people while we're up on Capitol Hill lobbying for the progression of the profession. And I made some good connections there. So luckily I had a position lined up before I graduated, and I was really excited about that. And when you go to school, I feel like all the schools, here's the average salary for chiropractors, and they're all showing like these six-figure incomes that you just think you're going to leave school and kind of fall into.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that first position was not one of those. But it was a good learning experience. I'm glad I did it. But looking back now, I wish I had made more connections and kind of educated myself a little bit more on how to make more opportunities available, so you don't just take the first thing that comes to you. And I really kind of wish I would have waited until I found a better situation, but I just jumped right into that because it's what I had.
Yeah. So you'd kind of gone to the effort like of networking, and so you'd got a job lined up. So it sounds like you kind of went out and looked for opportunities. On the other hand, it's like, well, I probably should have looked harder and spent more time, and you kind of didn't know enough to sort of know a good versus a not good opportunity. Then is that fair?
I would say that's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I about the contract that I had, I was like, I don't know, it was kind of a skew between independent contractor position and an associate position. There was a lot, which I find that to be a huge issue, at least over here in the US.
We're seeing the same here. It's like, I want to treat you like an employee, but pay you like an independent contractor. Yeah.
So But I learned from it. I found a much better position. My second job was actually with one of the chiropractors in the FTCA.
Hmm.
One of my professors from one of my colleges actually put me together with this guy because he knew I was more sports minded, interested in doing maybe some sports chiropractic at some point, and
Hmm.
I was a big Duke fan, so he connected me with Dr. Michael Krasnov, who was actually Duke's team chiropractor for I think like 10 to 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So I worked with him in Durham for a year, and I learned a ton there. It was a much better position, but just decided I didn't want to be in Durham anymore, and that's when I decided to contact my previous chiropractor here in my hometown, and another colleague of mine had informed me that he was moving locations. The other doctor that used to own the practice had retired and moved out, and he may be looking for an associate. So I reached out to him, and I've been here for just last month was my five year anniversary. So,
Nice. So yeah, 5 years. It's obviously working well for you. You're happy there then.
oh yeah, yeah, and he
Yeah.
made it clear when we met. He said, he never had an associate before. So that first year or two, there may have been a little bit of butting heads, just trying to kind of figure out the hierarchy of things, how to communicate, how he wanted things done, but at the same time, kind of letting me do my own thing.
Mm.
But he let right up front that he didn't want to have one of these situations where he was constantly cycling through associates, which you hear about clinics doing here all the time, and
Yeah.
about
Yeah. Same.
associate established where they've built rapport between their patients, and they've built up their own clinic schedule, their patient schedule. They're ready to move on. And he said he's not really looking for something like that. So there was good, clear communication from the very beginning. I was best in this situation.
Yeah. Brilliant. And so going back to that first position, like you said, you kind of you're like a bit naive as a student, like everyone is in the graduate. We kind of don't always know what to look for. What would you, if you could go back in time, what would you say to yourself then to say, hey, I think you know what you're getting into here, but this is what you should probably be looking for? Like, what advice would you kind of give yourself then?
Um, Really would be to go with my gut. When I read that contract, I'm like, I don't know, this just has some conflicting things here. It doesn't read like an associate position. And it was a very low percentage that they wanted me to they wanted to pay me. I think it was on like 30% of my total collections.
Hmm.
And right out of school, they put me in a clinic that was, in my opinion, looking back, it was not growing, or it didn't have the current capacity or the growth happening that would warrant somebody coming in and being able to live on 30%
Right.
of that. I
So
was
they
not.
want to pay you a little, but also not give you a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was those situations you're talking about where it felt like the clinic wasn't really giving me enough. I was happy if I saw maybe 6 or 8 patients a day. That was a good. 30% of that was not
It's
enough
tough
to.
to live on. Yeah. Yeah. Especially with the student debt you got. I mean, we like students over here complain about the student debt now. It's like £9,000 a year for 4 years. It's like, yeah, I paid three, and like 5 years before that, it was free. Like you didn't have to pay at all. So yeah, that's a tough deal compared to them, but it's not what you guys have over there. It's what like easily six figures minimum, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's a crazy amount of debt. And the way we do it is we tax it. So you kind of it's paid back based on your earnings. So if you don't earn below us, if you earn below a certain threshold, you don't pay it.
right.
I always say if you're not paying back your student loans as an associate chiropractor, like something's gone wrong because the threshold is lower than what you should be getting. But at least oh, okay, well, it's not like the bank's going to start knocking on my door even if I'm not earning at the minute. So that's added pressure I know for you guys over there. Do you? I mean, what was it in the contracts? You mentioned it was the pay was lower than you were expecting. Was there anything else in the contract that made you think, oh, this looking back was a bit of a yellow flag, maybe?
I don't remember all the specifics in the contract. Because I don't really think they put a specified. It wasn't in there. That was a big thing. They didn't put it in there. But I was expected when I got there to work the same hours as the other doctor in there, and go out and acquire my own patients. I think that was the big part. Was
Mm.
I had to go out and market myself to build up my side of the practice, and but I remember it saying in there somewhere that though even those patients that I acquire are patients of the clinic, not of the doctor. So I was like, so I've got to go out there and market for myself to build up my patient schedule, but they're they're patients of the clinic and not my patients, even though I'm, so I thought
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was a yellow flag right there. I was like, okay, so you guys want me to make a market for you, but you're only going to pay me 30%, and then you get to keep the patients. Like I didn't really, that was like, okay, that didn't make
That's
sense to
that
me.
against that blurring lines, isn't it? Like, am I self-employed renting a room or am I an employee here?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Okay. So what was it that, how long were you there for? Was it about a year, did you say?
Year and a half, I think,
Year and a half.
about
Okay. Was
yeah.
there, I mean, were you kind of like just gradually like, this isn't great, I'm going to keep an eye out? Or was there a moment where you were like, okay, I've made a mistake, I've got to change? Was that like a slow thing or a fairly fast realization, do you think?
I think it was pretty slow just
Mhm.
because, never in clinic, that was about how many patients we were seeing in there. So like, this is kind of a normal day, I'm used to seeing 6 to 8 patients a day, and that was a good schedule in school clinic. But, so you start collecting some of those paychecks, you're like, this is not,
Hmm.
feasible.
This isn't what the college promised me I'd be getting in my first year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting situation too, because the clinic that I went into, the doctor who owned the clinic, or they were building the clinic for, had just had a major surgery. So he was out
Hmm.
for 6 to 8 weeks. So I basically came straight out of school, and I was the only doctor there. So I was practically running the place with his assistant. And so that was where I got the most invaluable experience, though, like basically kind of learning how to, because you didn't really teach you in school how to run a clinic. Like they teach you how to be a
Yeah.
chiropractor, not a business owner, how to do the daily operations things within a practice. And so I
That's
had
why I
to,
find it crazy how many of you guys over there will set up your own thing from, like when you graduate. It's like you want to learn to be a chiropractor and an entrepreneur at the same time. Like those are both full-time jobs with steep learning curves. Yeah.
yeah, but I figured that out within about two months while he was gone. I kind of learned, how to do those things, at
Yeah,
least.
I see kind of thrown in the deep end there. If it's someone else's practice, so it's like I kind of got to do all this now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was an invaluable experience, and I'm glad that I had it, but I'm also glad that I wasn't stuck there for long.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I tell my team this. I nothing like that, but when I graduated, I was supposed to be taking over a chiropractor who was going on maternity leave. So she'd been kind of scaling down to about 50 a week, and I was going to take that and build up. And I hadn't even got my license through yet. I was going to spend a few days shadowing her while it came through. And the first day I show up and like the whole team was gathered around the front desk and they're like, "Oh, can they cover?" No, they're full. Oh no, they can't. And they looked at me and they're like, "Have you got your license?" I'm like, "No." They're like, "Do you think you could get it by 1 p.m. today?" Because the other clinic, well, there was one chiropractor there, and she was like fully booked, 140 a week all the time. She just had to go to hospital, and literally, I was like calling up like the GCC, like our board, being like, "Here's the situation. I know you've got all the paperwork. Is there any chance we could squeeze it through?" And I got the call at midday saying you've got your license, good to go. 1 p.m. First patient walks into my room. And that was 2 weeks of like fully booked back to back to back. And it was like open the file. Okay, what did they do? I'm just gonna do that again. Okay, next file. And yeah, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I tell my team we're never gonna do that to you. But boy, am I glad I did it. Yeah, it's a great thing to have done in the past. Like I'm glad past me put up with that, but current me doesn't have to deal with it. So you kind of had like an even bigger version of that. If you had like, so you haven't like run the practice to a degree then?
Yeah, I think I had the same situation though, where I hadn't received my license yet either. So I want
Mm.
to say first week or two, um, they had to bring in another doctor who had the license, and basically, I could do the exams and X-rays and history and some of those things, but when it came to the actual hands-on
Yeah.
manipulation, we had to let him do that. But yeah, same thing kind of happened as soon as my license got pushed through. Like, all right, we're sending him back home. It's your show now. So,
Yeah.
um, um, but yeah, it was an incredible learning experience.
Yeah. So you're there for about 18 months, and then you've realized, okay, this isn't for you. This other job's come up. And what was the kind of difference that you noticed there then? What made you think, okay, I got it wrong before, this job wasn't for me, but this looks different. What was kind of jumping out to you there?
Um, well, the contract, you could already tell, was written more for an employee. There are a lot more provisions and benefits included. I think this is when I started receiving either a stipend, or he was covering my malpractice, my continuing education. vacation time, stuff like that. And there was a ton of mentorship there too. Like I said, I in just that 1 year that I was there with him, I feel like my clinical skills and treatment skills just exponentially increased. And it was pretty clear. It's
Right.
like our clinic hours, these are when you're going to work. But yeah, it was just a much better situation, and the pay was automatically better than what I was making at the other place because it wasn't a percentage. It was similar to what I have now, where there's a mix of like a, a base salary plus a commission based bonus on
Kind
top
of
of that.
bonuses for hitting certain numbers and stuff. Yeah, yeah. So we got it. It was very clear that it was employed contract. Yeah, there was no kind of trying to have your cake and eat it too on their part. Just general clear communication and then mentorship as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about the mentorship. What was that like? Kind of how much were you getting? How did that differ to what you'd had before?
Well, it was basically, in the beginning, while I was building up my patient schedule, wasn't busy, so he would have me. He would even like pick out. We had like a calendar and everything. I think he used one of the breakthrough coaching group maybe a little bit. We kind of went through some of those things where they had like each day of the week there was something you kind of wanted to focus on.
Hmm.
So I did some of that, and there was one day we would go and we would do more manipulation. One day we'd go and we do more physiotherapeutic modalities. Certain learn new exams. I would just come in and watch him treat a patient. If I didn't have anybody, I'd just go kind of shadow him and
Okay.
see how he went through treatment of these, maybe some more rare conditions, more complicated sports related conditions, things I was interested in. Learn how to tape, learn how to cup,
Mm.
learn how to do some soft instrument assisted soft tissue stuff. Things that I'd gotten just a taste of in school, but hadn't really used a whole lot in practice.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got shadowing him. You've got it sounds like this coaching program. That's like resources you can go like videos you can watch and stuff like that that he's paid for and provided for you. And then was there like one-to-one time discussing things as well on top of
Oh
that?
yeah,
Was that more? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, how much contact did you have? Say the average week when you were starting out. How much time were you spending kind of with him versus like on your own, either treating patients or doing your own learning?
Hmm. I mean,
Memory test, I know.
yeah, that's been a few years. It would surprise me if it was pretty close to 50-50 in the beginning. I mean, honestly,
Mm,
because he had another associate there right at the time. He was eventually going to transition out, so I kind of started taking over some of his patients eventually. But in the beginning, it was pretty slow as far as me one-on-one, hands-on patients. So it was probably pretty close to 50-50, me working on patients and me spending time with him or with the other doctor, the other associate. I might not have been with the owner of the clinic, but I kind of bounced back and forth between
yeah.
those two.
So you were able to shadow the other associate as well. I mean, were they coaching you as well, or were you kind of you'd come in to observe them?
Um, I wouldn't really say they approached it as coaching. I tried to treat it that way. I think he and I were around the same age and probably around the same experience level. I don't. He may have had maybe one more year in practice on me. I'm not
Okay.
sure. So it was more of a peer colleague type of conversation
Right.
where
Kind of,
us
hey, I'm stuck on this case. What would you do here? Kind of like that back and forth.
right, asking each other questions, and I would kind of show him some things that I thought might help him in his approach to certain
Mm.
conditions or
How
issues. And
how valuable would you say that was? Because obviously the kind of mentoring from your boss, that's kind of invaluable. You've got somebody who's got a ton more experience than you, who's been doing this for a long time, especially the level where they're at with sports. Um, but how big a deal is it for you that you've also got other peers who maybe aren't coaching you, but you can go back and forth and you can ask for help?
I think that's great because I found when I was in school, when I started, we have a motion palpation institute over here. I think you might be
Mhm.
familiar with the MPI
Yeah, yeah.
club on campus where we would meet outside of classroom hours and learn how to motion palpate and set up for adjustments, do different manipulations, different, we get some CEs and stuff. And I took over that club down at the Florida campus for my school before I transferred up to the Illinois campus. And I found that when I started teaching people these things, even while still in school, that was another benchmark in my, I guess this would technically still be my educational career, but where my skills went from here to there, just that being able
Yeah,
to
it forces you to know something if you're going to teach it, doesn't it? That's kind
exactly.
of how I got involved in the communication stuff as well. It really made me learn it. Because you can kind of fool yourself, you know something, but you can't fool other people as
Right.
well. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That was kind of the next thing I was going to ask, really. So there's a number of things there in terms of situations to look out for, things to look at the contracts, how to know a good opportunity versus not so good an opportunity, how to work out if it's a good fit. If we change gears a little bit, like what are you say some of the things you did, or maybe some of the things you focused on that have allowed you to be as successful as you have been as an associate? Like we've got the external situation. What about the internal stuff?
Um, I always try to keep good relationships, obviously with my employer.
Mhm.
Anytime I have a question about a case, I'm questioning whether or not I should approach it this way or order imaging or do these things. I'll go ask him. But then also with the staff, especially at the current office, I feel like I probably have a closer relationship with the staff there than my boss does, just because he's busier than I am. He's handling all the administrative stuff and seeing more patients than I am. So I sit in a place where I'm more out in the open and I kind of interact with the staff more.
Yeah.
That's one thing I feel like has really helped me grow and kind of gain that respect and rapport with not just the people that I'm working on, but the people that I'm working with.
Yeah.
Like that's been a huge difference here too. And I've kind of felt that way looking back now, even at the previous location. I felt like I had kind of a closer relationship with the staff there. So, and I've even asked them at some points in times, like, if there's anything you want me to do to help, clear up things with the staff, since I feel like we've got a pretty good relationship, just let me know. Like we can kind of trickle downstream,
Mm.
if there's something that you want me to try to instruct them on or help them with, or anything that you want me to take over as far as like staff meetings, just
So
trying to.
you're going to your employer saying, "Hey, if you'd like to hand me a bit of responsibility around this is something I feel I could help with."
Yeah, absolutely. Just
Yeah.
to kind of myself as more someone who's more valuable than just an employee or just an associate. And that's one thing he and I've always talked about too, is the opportunity for a partnership eventually, or
Mm.
buying into or buying him out of the practice eventually. So, after 3 or 4 years now, 5 years here, I keep trying to find ways to show that I have the skills and abilities to, start taking some of those responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that's a really I want to really underscore that. I think that's a key point is that I've said this to newer grads and associates before who have like been struggling and felt like they're not getting what they should, or if they like negotiate like a pay rise or something like that. And I'm like, if you can make yourself invaluable to the clinic, it doesn't have to be this antagonistic thing, but it's like if you want to like earn more, you need to be more valuable. Like if
Right.
you can, I say to my team here, like I want you all to be so good that I couldn't afford to be without you.
Right.
And then guess what? You're going to be rewarded that way as well. It's if you can look for those opportunities. I think many of us, especially I think newer practices, 'cause, there's a lot going on. It's overwhelming your first couple of years anyway. But there's a tendency to kind of like sit and wait for things that you expect instead of going like, okay, how can I be a bit proactive here? Or like, I had a great chat with a couple of my team members the other day. They were, you know, wanted to make some changes, some shifts, and some admin stuff like that. And they actually apologized because they were saying like, like we have been really trying to like work out and find a solution because we didn't want to just come to you with a problem. It's just we couldn't find one that works. Which
Right.
to me was like, okay, they got it. Like, the fact that they couldn't find a solution is fine, but it's the fact they didn't just come to me and be like, hey, here's a problem and I want you to fix it. If
Right.
they've come, they might even if they come up with a terrible solution, then I'm like, no, that would not work at all. The fact that you're looking for ways that you can contribute, you're looking for something you can do to go, this is something I'd like to change, but here's a way I thought that could do that. It's that kind of shared responsibility for the practice. I think that always to me really impresses me in somebody when they're, especially if they're fairly new as well. They've only been out a few years, so I think that's a really, really key point. It's just looking for ways you can contribute. It doesn't mean here's how I can do a load of work for free, or you should be, taking over. Like, a lot of clinics will say, "Oh, the associate, hey, you're young, you should like manage the social media." It's like
Yeah.
some of them, yeah. Like one of ours, she's good at that. She does a great job with it. But others, it's like, no, that's not. That's not the same skill set as being a chiropractor. That's not what they
Right.
train to study for. So if you've got somebody who wants to, great, but that doesn't mean you should look for stuff outside of your scope. Um, Would you say, like, if you presumably you've spoken to like peers and like people you study with and things like that, and I imagine you have heard stories of people who haven't had the same experience you have, like who haven't maybe they had a bit of an easier start or whatever, but they haven't got to the point where you're at now, where you've got a really good position, it's going really well, you get on really well, and you know you're earning a comfortable income from that. You're not like, oh, it's just okay, but I need to sort of make sure I make it each month. Presumably you've kind of spoken to people who are more of that boat, who are maybe struggling a bit. Um, and what would you say is there? What's different about you versus those people? Like if we think like in terms of like characteristics or things that you exhibit. I'm not asking you to like label anyone, and like we said, external situation plays a big role. Um, but is there anything you think, yeah, this is something that's a little different about me, and I think that's why I've been able to be more successful?
Well, I think the reason you and I have connected so well is because I value communication,
Mm,
and I'm very much a social butterfly. So I just meet people, talk to people, and make connections every way possible. And I'm a only child. I don't know if that's what's made me a very competitive person, but I've always been very competitive. I've never really given up on anything that I've, yes, I've failed, a couple times, but how do I turn that into a lesson to do it better the next time?
mm,
And I would say, there's a fair amount of luck, I would say, in this maybe. The fact that I ended up back in my hometown, so automatically being from this area brought patients to the practice. I grew up going to like three different churches in town. I've got my family and friends here. Um, I've also put myself back out into the community. I'm on the board of directors for a local nonprofit foundation, and very involved with that. And it's like you said, it's some of the external things, outside of the practice. But also, I mean, I really do, when I'm in the room with that patient who's on my schedule at that point in time, that's the only person that matters to me right
mm.
then. And they can see that. And when they see that, and I communicate with them, get them the results they're looking for quickly, and just build up more of a personal relationship. I like to get to know my patients for more than just the problems that they're coming to me for. And especially in this region, people, when they trust you, they'll do anything for you. It's big here in the South, in the U.S. is people like other people like them in this area. So being from this area, it makes them very comfortable with me. And I get referrals from patients all the time. We don't really spend a lot of money. I don't remember the last time we paid for like a Facebook ad or any type of like marketing. I mean, it really is, our practice is basically a referral based practice. And I have at least two or three new patients on my schedule like every single day.
Mm.
I've had some weeks where I've had like 20 new patients in 1 week.
Wow.
And that's not really doing any marketing. So I find that, being a personable person, like you, 'cause you can teach clinical skills, you can't teach personality. So I feel like that's the thing is, being personable, being respectful, listening, and encouraging, and then putting yourself out in the community. It can be a little more difficult for introverted clinicians. Not everyone has that inclination to go out and make connections with people. But I find that that's probably been, I mean, every job that I've got has been because of a connection, not because of, I looked at an ad, or, I had somebody contact me.
Yeah.
I was the one that got out there and did the, contacting and connecting, and following those
So
leads.
you're busy creating opportunities. You're not sort of waiting for opportunities to come along and grab those. It's because you mentioned luck, and it always reminds me of this phrase that luck is where opportunity meets preparedness.
Right.
It's like, it's like you kind of like create. There was a show, I remember seeing this as a kid years ago, that they compared a really lucky person to a really unlucky person. And they basically showed that the lucky person, like it was even something simple, like when they were walking down the street, they were looking around. And they did a little trick where they left like a £50 note just off to the side. And the lucky person looking around, they see it, they go, oh, I just found like £50. That's great. And the unlucky person, they film them and they're like kind of looking down at the floor, and they went right past it. And they played them both for tape. And the unlucky one was like, huh, okay, I need to rethink this. Maybe me being unlucky, it's like maybe I have some role in that. Like, you know, opportunity still comes along. Like you say, it's being in your hometown. That's an advantage. Um, but even then, that's it. It sounds like that's given you like a bit more of a foot in the door and a bit more of a fast track to you're already embedded in some communities, but you haven't gone, I knew people from childhood, so they're coming in. You've gone out and gone, right, how can I get involved in the community now? Which
Right.
presumably, if this wasn't your hometown, you could still go out and do that. Might
Right.
take a little bit more. You might have to kind of get the lay of the land, spend a bit more time networking at the start. But I think, yeah, if you can get involved in the community so people know you as a person, not just a chiropractor, and
Right.
you're out there meeting other people, then naturally, this comes up in FTCA all the time from the older docs. They're like, yeah, like I get referrals from people who like just knew me because I went to church with them, or they knew me because I'm on the board of this thing, or a member of the local Lions Club, or whatever it might be. Like that's a really good source of referrals without you saying, hey, you need to like learn to stand up in front of a group and deliver a talk on how chiropractic can help sports injuries or elderly people or whatever. I mean, yeah, extroverts like you and me are going to have an easier time with that, but that doesn't have to be the way you go about it, I think. And it's true. I think you're right. Introverts, it can be it's a bit more out of their comfort zone. But having said that, I would say that we've got some of my team are introverts, and with introverted patients, they just click. Like they're just like, someone who's on my level. That kind of one-to-one interaction, they I might cover their patients, and I could like, if I'm not careful, bowl in, be like, hey, I'm Chris, a massive extrovert. Like, well, okay, like I'm used to
Back
a
up.
bit of a calmer approach. So, I think it's not. I often hear people talk about, it's just easy being an extrovert chiropractor, and it's like, well, there's definite advantages, and I would say on the whole, probably it is, but I'm massively biased because I am one, and we're going to have a biased conversation because we both are. We'd like that to be true, but I think there's definite advantages to introverts. It's just I don't know, maybe the introverts who realize that aren't out on social media shouting about it. That might be why it's not so obvious there. Um, but yeah, it sounds like it's that, and there's the kind of dedication. It sounds like that's like an underlying theme for this. You've gone out to look for things, you've put in the work, you haven't sort of sat back and waited for things to land in your lap thing. Is that something that you've always kind of had, or is that something that you've put a conscious effort into?
Um, I feel like it's been there to some degree, pretty much my whole life. But definitely, I think during that first position where I had to go out and work for all of these things, um, try to build up my patient schedule, get out there and market myself and do those uncomfortable talks that you can tell no one's paying attention to. But it definitely makes it easier to do those things when you get the positive reinforcement from it, though.
Hmm.
When you actually finally start seeing some of the fruits of your labor, and that's the hard part. I think that's the hard part for associates nowadays, or even when I was graduating, is we kind of come from a generation where we just kind of expect things to happen, or we've gotten used to a lot of things being given to us. And I mean, I think it took me 3 years in my current position, so that would have been what, almost 6 years in practice before I
Hmm.
finally hit the six-figure mark, and two failed positions. But once I found, and that's the thing too, is like I encourage young associates, like, don't give up. If you're at a place where you're not happy, try to make it better between you and your employer.
Hmm.
Start looking for something that automatically looks like a better situation, a better environment. Because once I got here, like I said, it was with those 3 years, it was like steady from year one, year two, year three. I mean, it's continued, all the way through year
Yeah.
five.
But the other thing
Um,
as well to push back on that a little bit is you're not coming in at the same level. You've got a couple of years experience at that point. Like, it's over here in the UK. There's a shortage of chiropractors. Like, there's more job ads out than there are chiropractors graduating all the time. Since Brexit as well, we have a lot of international students from Europe, and they used to come over, graduate, spend a few years working here before they went back home. But now we're out of the EU, they're going home right afterwards. So we don't have enough chiropractors, and that means that like if you've got 2 years experience, it's like gold dust. Like you will have clinics falling over themselves to try and employ you because that 2 year difference. It's like, yeah, 2 year is 5 year isn't 10 year, but boy, those first 2 years, that's the kind of steepest learning curve, and the difference between. I mean, I see it in our associates, almost all of them. yeah, all of them bar one have come to us from graduation. And I love sitting down with them in like January. You know, they've been practicing for like 4 or 5 months. Like, remember where you were in August and where you're at now? They're like, yeah, that was a different person. It's like,
Right.
yeah, that's the start of this slope. It makes such a difference going from there. But yeah, so having that kind of, I guess what you're saying there is patience. It's like, yes, look to see if you can make some changes. Don't wait for something to come along. Don't think it's just sitting back. Like, look for opportunities. Yeah, where can you make this work? I've seen chiropractors where they've been really unhappy in a job, and it turns out they just needed to really have a few maybe slightly uncomfortable but important conversations with their boss, and then it works really well. It doesn't immediately mean, oh, I've been here 6 months and I'm not happy and I'm not making the average chiropractor's income having come straight from uni. Obviously, I should quit and find another one.
Right.
And it's tricky. I think over here it's a little tricky because they know there's quite a lot of jobs. It's easier to hop around jobs because the grass is always greener and there's always something else out there that looks a bit better. And yeah, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 of them hopping around to go, okay, maybe maybe changing the job isn't what I need to change here. Maybe there's something else. Um, okay, so I mean, what advice would you give if you, let's say you were talking to a newer chiropractor there, you know, they've been out a couple of years, they're doing all right, but they're kind of struggling, they're not really finding it. Like you said, if having a talk with their boss is probably something that might be worth doing there. Is there any advice you'd give? Let's say that they are in a job that could work, but it's not quite working for them, like some changes they could maybe make or things to consider in their current position.
I think that's where groups like the Forward Thinking Chiropractic Alliance really come in. A lot of times, even as an associate, you work in a clinic with another doctor, but they're so busy you don't really see them or talk to them very often. So I know a lot of they call themselves lone wolves, where they're their own doctor in their own office. They're the only one there, and they feel very isolated. So I think that building, this is another thing, connecting to community, building that community around you, finding a community if you don't have one. And I encourage everyone to get plugged into the FTCA and find those of us who are very involved in there, and just reach out to people, ask questions, see other doctors who, if you see them commenting on how they've been through what you've been through but they're where you want to be now, ask them how did you get there.
Yeah.
I have to ask them, like, man, you found a really awesome associate position, like, what's that like, how did you get there? So I think that's the big thing is reach out to peers, colleagues, maybe doctors who are a couple, 2 or 3 years further ahead in practice than you are, and just build up that community around you, so that way you don't feel isolated. Because even in a office with another doctor, you can still feel like a lone wolf. So that's where FTCA was a huge part of, I think, my being plugged into good continuing education seminars to actually make yourself a better clinician. That's another way to add value to yourself for your employer too, is go out there and don't just go to your state convention where it's just a bunch of useless information that's not going to improve. You're not going to be able to go back in clinic on Monday and be a better doctor because of this lecture you sat through. Go learn some new clinical skills. And yeah, I just make yourself as valuable as possible. Kind of going back to what we were do earlier is, I mean, we have a ton of skills and knowledge coming out of school, but there are a lot of ways after that to continue adding value to yourself, for your practice if you want to open it up yourself, or to your employer to pay you fair, if they want to hire you on as an associate.
Yeah, because here's the really cool thing, right? You invest in yourself. It's like, well, no one sees a better return on that investment than you do.
Right.
Like, that's an investment that's going to pay off. If you're at the start of your career, that's going to pay off for 40 years. Like, that's huge. Yes, you go and work for somebody else, they'll get some of the benefits to that too, but not nearly as much as it will pay off for you for the whole career. I want to underline that plug for FTCA as well, because I'm aware some people like watching this might not be aware of that. So FTCA is Forward Thinking Chiropractic Alliance. It's a separate membership as well, but there's a big group on Facebook. There's about 10,000 chiros in there. That for me, I found you guys like what, 6, 7 years ago. Like, literally, it's like when I started coaching actually, and that was one of the first groups that I was like, okay, this is a really like active, vibrant group. There's a lot of disagreements. You'll get conflicting opinions in there, but that's great because you don't get a lot of the group thing. You don't get a lot of that. we all say the same thing because we all believe the same technique.
That's where
And
growth.
yeah, so I would definitely. I realize some of the youngsters will think we're old for talking about Facebook, uh, but it's worth having the Facebook account for. I think it's, and like you say, it's a really great place to not realize that, to realize you're not alone. Because that isolation I've had, because I do a lot of mentoring with the Royal College of Chiropractors as well. So not just like folks who hire me or folks who work for me, but most of the UK graduates I'll have some kind of contact with, whether it's like a webinar or two or something. And a lot of them will reach out through that and say like, hey, I'm struggling with this or that. And the isolation, I think, is huge. That's one of the most common themes I hear is like, and they might be working somewhere, they might be working for someone else, but they're like passing ships in the night, or they're just, a lot of the time, I think clinic owners, it's easy for us to forget what it's like to be a new graduate and what it's like to have only been out a few years there. But and we are, frankly, like this is my little sob story for clinic owners, where it's like, oh, think about us. But we're that busy with running it, and if there's several people involved in the business, we're making sure the whole team's working together, make sure everyone's happy, make sure the patients are happy. We're doing the books, we're looking at the admin side of stuff, we're treating our own patients as well. And it's really easy for us to sometimes forget that this associate that I've got, just because they're not coming to me with something doesn't mean they need some help. I think too many of us fall into the habit of being like, look, man, open door policy, anything you want, message me anytime. But if you don't message me, I'm going to assume everything's fine. And that's not good. I really try and take an active role to go, let me be proactive and check in with them and make sure stuff's okay. But I think a lot of us as clinic owners, we're keeping so many plates spinning, we can forget about that element there, which just means that, like, go and have that chat. If somebody comes to me with a problem, I'm always like, oh, thank God I didn't not know about that. But so there's that element that, it's where I'm trying to let us all off the hook. But I'd like to think we could do a better job with that. But yeah, having that input from, and like, we've been chatting for a couple of years now. Like, this is the closest we've ever come to meeting. This is our first like live conversation on Zoom. I don't know if you knew Rob Pape. He was one of the mods back in the day. This guy's a mentor of mine for like, pretty much since I joined FTCA, like 6-7 years now. Never met him. He's had the biggest impact on my entire career. He's like made such a difference to all these things I've learned. Never, like, we've chatted on Zoom, never met the guy in person. Like, it's amazing the way you can just connect people like other side of the world now. So yeah, I think that's a really, really big one actually. Like you say, go out and just find other people. And it doesn't mean you have to put a post in a group of 10,000 people being like, hey, I'm struggling and I'm freaking out and the imposter syndrome's getting the better of me. But just hanging out in the group, and I think seeing the conversations, if you can realize that you're not alone, that, oh, it's not just me struggling with this unique burden, I think that goes a long way to go, okay, well, maybe it's not like, the end of the world. Maybe I might be all right there. So I think that we've covered quite a bit of this already. I mean, would you say there's any other like mistakes that, like, maybe not like right when they graduate, but folks who've been out, say 2, 3, 4 years, are there any kind of common themes you see there of like mistakes they might make, or things where you're like, yeah, a lot of people tend to do this and they don't realize that it might not go the way they want?
I would say at that point, that's probably when the burnout starts to set in. You're getting busier, but you may not still be making the amount of money that you want to make or need to make. You're kind of hitting that point where you feel confident enough to maybe go run the practice, even though you've never tried that. And I think some have maybe left after 2 or 3 years and tried that and seen that, okay, this is way more than I thought that it was. And then
and I'm not making that much more money. I think it turns out that other like 50-60% that my employer's keeping, that's not just going into their bank account. Like, oh, they've got overheads and stuff.
Yeah. I think that's probably the big one to watch out for. And who's to say, like, I don't know if I would ever end up leaving this practice to go try to run, my own thing. There have been some times where I was like, oh, I'd like to do this a little bit differently than my employer, or, may have disagreed on something, nothing like serious. But then I sit back and I was like, you know what though? Like, I'm making a really good livable wage here. I get to treat my patients, do my notes, get paid, and go home. Like, he had like plumbing and HVAC and staffing. We had people quit. You had to find new employees and like that. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So there's definitely. I
think there's a lot to be said for that. That I can go home and I'm at home, because once you run your own business, it's never off your mind.
Right.
Like it's not that it's a disaster, you know. And again, this isn't sob story. I love it because I couldn't long term. I couldn't work for someone else if I did. Like I'm a control freak. Like I need that like freedom and autonomy, and I will accept the significant risk and stress that goes with that. But that it's not, grass isn't always green. And I also think like being a business owner is not for everybody. I think there's a number of chiropractors who really, for their own long term quality of life, would be better staying as an associate. Like maybe they need a better associate position. Maybe that could change. But we kind of have this sort of myth in chiropractic that like the progression is like, you know, student, and then you graduate, and then you go be an associate or an independent contractor, and then you run your own practice, and then you hire other people to work in that practice. Um, and the lone wolf guys kind of opt out part way. But I do think, which is the right move, because not everybody, especially if you're an introvert, like managing a team is tough. Like that's a big drain there, and that doesn't mean you're necessarily well placed to do that in terms of your own skill set. But you know, some people opt out of being an associate, and that can be completely the right move. We had a guy who was working for us for a few years, and then he set up his own practice in London. So he started, as he got busier there, he kind of dropped down with us. So he had this nice handover. And after a couple of years, he dropped us a message to be like, "Hey, are you guys hiring? I hate this. I want to come back and be an associate." He was like, "Yeah, it's not worth the stress." Again, I sound like I'm trying to be like, "Oh, poor clinic owners." Like, it's not that, but yeah, being able to like switch off at the end of the day and go like, "Okay, there's no patient in the room with me, and the notes are done. There's nothing to do." Um, there's, you know, part of me misses that stuff. I look back at like, you know, younger Chris, and I'm like, man, that was nice, wasn't it? You know, I wouldn't go back and trade it, but there's a lot to be said for that, I think. And yeah, that there's not. It doesn't mean you have. This is like the hierarchy, and if you don't go all the way to the top, you're like, you know, not living your best life or succeeding your potential as a chiropractor. So okay, I think we've got some stuff there definitely. The other thing I want to ask, this is a little bit of a tangent, but well, actually no, you know what? I forget. I want to explore the burnout thing a little bit more that you mentioned. Can you speak a bit more about that? Like that's the burnout. Is that something you've experienced, or have you seen with others, or that kind of like you say 3-4 year mark where it starts to kick in?
I think the only reason I experienced that was just because I think this was like my third job within 3 years. The biggest burnout for me was feeling like I would build something up and then I'd have to go restart somewhere else, and then build something, go restart somewhere else. So that would be my biggest thing too, as why to try your best to find the best associate position. If this is what you want to do, to go find the best associate position, first place. Because when you start somewhere and you feel like you're finally accomplishing something, but then determine that this is not the right place for you, it is really, really hard. I mean, I made myself sick both times I had to like quit. Even that first job where I was like not making any money and pretty miserable, I still worried myself sick. I'm like, oh my God, like where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Like, am I going to have patients there? And then when I reached a good point there, I'd finally grown in that year, and I'm like, well, here I am. I don't like living where I'm living right now. I mean, it was a good clinic, good mentor, good experience, but I just didn't. My wife at the time and I didn't want to be there anymore. So here I was again. I was like, well, damn, I'm pretty close to making what I feel like I'm worth, and now I'm gonna have to go start over again somewhere else. So I feel like that constant restarting was the biggest part of burnout for me. I think for a lot of the others, from what I've heard, anyways, in conversation, is it's just I feel like it's being overworked and underpaid. I think is where a lot of the burnout comes from a lot of the associates that I've seen post on Facebook or in FTCA. I've lost count now after people have seen my comments or my presentation. They've sent me private messages on Facebook about, hey, what do you think about this in my contract, or just ask for advice or information. So I think it's probably those two things, with having to feel like you're having to restart and rebuild over and over again, or just feel like you're being overworked and underpaid and underappreciated, undervalued. It's you were talking about the clinic owner being in communication with the employee, the associate, and my boss. I don't think it's quite monthly, maybe closer to quarterly, but he'll ask me, he's like, hey, what are you doing Friday after work? And I was like, I don't have any plans. So, all right, let's go grab a pint, and we'll go to the local breweries. We'll sit down and we'll talk about life, but we'll also, he'll be like, before we end, we'll talk about, clinic stuff. So it's nice to be able to sit back and unwind over a nice cold beer and still, get some business talk done too. So that helps with the burnout, just like, and getting that reassurance from your employer that, hey, I value you, you're here. I don't want to hire anybody else. And I feel like I've kind of met that expectation or exceeded it to the point to where I think that I've finally made myself an associate who's so valuable to the clinic at this point in time that it would be really silly for him to let me go at this point.
Yeah, which gives you that sense of security, like, okay, I know I'm doing a good job, and they've validated that well, like,
right?
Because I think otherwise, yeah, when you're an associate, it's I think that's a common fear, is like this kind of fear, like, am I doing a good job? Am I good enough? Are they happy with me? Are they not happy with me? And I think, yeah, we don't always do the best job as a clinic owner, when you're an entrepreneur, you're off. It's not like it's a total disaster, but you're often kind of going like, okay, you just like put one fire out and it settles down and another one pops up. So you're kind of used to like dealing with problems and like manage this, manage that. And we're not always so great at going like, hey, this thing's going really well. Why don't I tell that person that? Why don't I let them know, by the way, you're doing a great job here. And I certainly, I try to do that. Like I talk about imposter syndrome a lot with any grad I can, frankly. So I'll never forget one time we had a couple of new associates join the team, and it was our Christmas party. And my business partner Pauline is next door. We all went next door. We do this every year, had like a big party and drinks, all that kind of stuff. And there's because we got 2 clinics and partners came. So I don't know, there's about 40 people there. And I'm chatting to somebody. I don't remember who I was talking to in the moment, but I just hear like my wife yell my name in that tone that is like, oh, I might be in trouble here. This wasn't like a, hey, Chris. It's like a, Chris, get over here. And she's talking to these 2 associates, and I come over, and she's looking at me like, you didn't tell them. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you didn't tell them about your imposter syndrome. And I was looking at them like, oh, didn't I? They're like wide-eyed, like, no. They're like, did you feel it? I'm like, yeah, no, of course. Like, nearly everyone feels like that. Like, yeah, I struggle with that stuff. She's like, you didn't tell them this. They've been freaking out thinking there's something wrong with them. And I've just told them that, yeah, you had that too. And they didn't know. They've been here like nearly a year. And they were like, I had no idea. I was like, oh, okay, I think I've messed up. Like, so now I'm like, I want to like drill that in. Like, yep, I've had it too. Like, let's just kind of like normalize it a little bit. Because otherwise, yeah, it's when you're starting out, it's that feeling of everyone, and especially with social media, like, like not necessarily like in specific groups, but like we're confronted with people all the time doing awesome things, doing amazing stuff, not even chiropractic, but like so much of what we take in is people doing incredible stuff that it sort of sets the bar, like that primate part of our brain of like, where's my status in the tribe, is like, well, most of the people I see are really awesome, so I must be terrible. And if I could really become awesome, I might be average. It's totally unnatural compared to like, what we evolved for. It's like those small communities, like you only had to be like good at what better than like, the 50, 60 people at one thing, and you were an expert. And like, that was it. And I think that's something that it's even harder nowadays with all the stuff we're confronting. I'm going on my anti-social media rant here. But join the FTCA Facebook group, because we're honest. I say we, I'm not even involved. I just love it. But yeah, I think it's that kind of like normalizing the struggle and the grind a little bit as well. That like that is part of it, and you're not necessarily alone. Anyway, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent there. I'm aware of the time, so I thought we'd probably wrap things up a little bit. A couple of the quick questions I wanted to ask. This one's it's related a little bit to the burnout and I think the stress here. Is how do you like go about managing that sort of work-life balance? Because I think for many chiropractors, it's easy for us to get like all about the work. I'm a workaholic in recovery for about 10 years. Like it's so easy, I think, to mismanage that balance. How do you go about trying to like keep on top of that?
Well, this year in particular, I'm prioritizing taking more time off. I just took that last week, the whole week off, exploring new places. We have 2 massage therapists in our clinic, so I take advantage of that. I try to every month get a massage from one of the massage therapists. If I find a time where my boss and I aren't with a patient, I get my monthly adjustment from him as well too. So I preach maintenance care to my patients, and I try to practice it for myself as well. And then getting out and getting involved in the community, spending plenty of time with family, friends, taking advantage of the weekends. I was working Saturdays, and I finally got those off this year. So now, I fully take advantage of that, having 2 full days off in a row, trying to get outside, get out in nature. Church is a big thing for me. I try to find anything that fills my cup up, because you probably know this too, as an extrovert, and especially an extrovert in a healthcare profession, where it's literally hands-on. You're pouring into people all day long, taking care of other problems. I've just tried to find every way possible to try to fill my cup back up, and that's do the things you enjoy, man. And if you don't feel like you have time for it, you have to start making time for it, because
you won't find the time. You got to make the time, I think.
Yeah. So that's the big thing, getting out in nature, staying close with my family and friends. And once again, it's just having that support group. I'm very blessed with a very, very loving, very tight knit family, a close group of friends that are always checking in on me, a good group of peers and mentors. So yeah, I think that's how, because there's always going to be more work to do. There's always going to be stuff that you can say yes to, and that's one thing I'm still trying to learn how to say no. That's a big one that I struggle with. So I do not know how to say no, and no period is a complete. You don't have to explain why you don't want to, can't do something.
Well,
yeah, no, just no, thank you. So that's one, like you said, a workaholic in recovery. I'm a yes man in recovery, and I don't think I've quite made it into recovery for that.
I think recovery is a journey rather than a destination. Like I'm never not going to get pulled in certain things, I think. So I'm as you're talking, it sort of occurred to me. Like, I think the one kind of theme we could say runs through this whole thing is like connection. Yeah, in terms of like filling your cup up, it's like connecting with friends and family, connecting with church, connecting with your community, like connecting with yourself, making sure you're staying in touch with your own body, taking care of yourself, physically as well there. And like making sure you're connected with your employer. If there's some miscommunication there, restore that connection. Get connected with other chiropractors, whether it's FTCA Group, getting to know other people. Yeah, I was just thinking that as you said it. Okay, I think if we can put this whole conversation in one word, it's probably connection there. Which is cool, because I don't know about you, but that confirms like all my biases. That
Yeah,
that definitely resonates.
And luckily for me, giving fulfills me. Like I love giving of my time, my energy, my expertise, my skills. So thankfully, even in the hard times in life, like actually there have been times where work was my happy place, and actually I preferred to be there than other places.
Yeah.
But that's where I felt like I was doing what I was created to do. And you especially when you reach that point to where you've really kind of honed in on your clinical skills, you've honed in on your communication skills, you're really connecting with your patients, and you're helping them get better faster. You get that. It's almost like the instant gratification that we're always looking for. So if I can get in there and I can help somebody else get what they want, that's what I want too. So that's a big thing. That's kind of a dichotomy in the U.S. with the chiropractic, is we have these like ultra passionate chiropractors who are like borderline religion that we kind of shun, but then we've got the evidence.
You send something to us as well. We get them over here.
And we've got the evidence-based group though, who are like, it's almost like it's bad to be passionate about,
Yeah.
So I feel like there's
it's
sort
of like I think a lot of the evidence base, it can go the route of like teenage atheist. It's like, like that's all stupid and rubbish, and like anyone who's passionate about anything, they're just trying to sell you something. It's like, yeah, like some cynicism's not always unwarranted, but it's not a great philosophy of life. I think if you do that all the time. I put a post out of that recently, and it's definitely a few people I've seen like, okay, you feel like I'm talking to you personally here. Maybe listen, maybe read it. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked there. Yeah, but no, definitely. I think I guess to wrap this up, I think that's a really good point, and I think that's true. Like, not to be afraid of the passion, not to be kind of like too swayed by one way either side there. I guess like the last question I wanted to ask, like, what's next for you? What are you like? Not even like career wise, but like, is there anything you're thinking? Yeah, this year, next year, I kind of want to focus on that, or is there anything you'd like to kind of like particular goals you might have further in the future at the minute?
Oh, think this year, Chris, you know a bit more about my personal situation right now. This year's just survive.
Yeah. Bit of
um,
stability and yeah, consistency.
but no, I mean, I've become really comfortable here, you know, and I've continued to see growth over the years. So I want to try to find ways to continue growing. You know, I don't want to hit that point to where, you know, I don't feel like I'm doing more, doing enough, getting better. Um, but yeah, like I said, I think this year is going to be a big year where I focus more on me than on work and practice and
Mm.
chiropractic, patients or whatnot. Like when I'm in the room with that patient, that's all that matters. But when I'm outside of that room, I'm trying to find ways to kind of focus more back on me. So it's a big thing this year is I want to travel more. I'm going to have more time and hopefully more money to do that. So I want to take advantage of that while I can.
UK is
Uh,
lovely in summer.
right? Yeah. I mean, internet bucket list. I haven't traveled outside of the country yet, so I need to make that happen for sure. If I do, I'm going to look you up and we'll try to maybe finally meet in person.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love that. That'd be great.
Yeah, so that's a big one. And then I think you know, I still haven't picked up my continuing education for this year, so I really need to get on that. But I'm thinking about maybe going into doing some dry needling, something else like I was talking about earlier to, you know, add more tools to my clinical skill set. So those are the big things, is, you know, making sure I'm still growing in practice, but, you know, this is work-life balance. Um, keeping that under control. This, I think, is going to be the main thing for me.
Yeah, I think it's a really good place to wrap this up actually, because I know that's, and again, my new graduates I see that's a lot, is they kind of go all in on the work. And I think this might have been Bobby. Somebody in the group a while ago, they sort of said like advice for new grads was coming up, and they said, yeah, like go back to your hobbies. Like that stuff you used to do that you loved when you were younger and you dropped because you got so serious about like university work and graduating, like go back to that now. Don't wait until you're burned out and you have to learn that the hard way.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think having that balance is and it makes you a better chiropractor. Like you will fundamentally be more present with your patients if you're filling your cup up on the weekends and taking breaks and stuff like that. You know, I've seen chiropractors where they're giving so much to their patients all the time, and it's like that car's running on fumes, man. Like you haven't got a lot to give. Like your patients aren't getting much out of you because you're not filling it up on the other side there. Brilliant. Well, that about wraps us up. I really appreciate you taking the time for this as well. Wanted to do this for a little while, and yeah, I think this is a really good conversation, really valuable for not just like new graduates, but chiropractors like yourselves who've been associate for a number of years now, and hopefully some clinic owners. This might give a little bit of an insight into the ways the associates you hire might struggle a little bit as well. Was there anything we didn't mention that you kind of you wanted to throw before we went, or I know we covered quite a lot there, so maybe not.
no, not that I can think of. I just, you know, I think the big thing is to try to be. That was, I put it in one of the comments or one of the posts. I think you were, um, who was it? If you love your job, leave advice. If you hate your job, ask a
Oh yeah,
question.
yeah,
There, and you know, my big thing is just, you know, just try to be present in every day. If when you're in the clinic, the treatment room with your patient, try to be present with them. When you're outside of the office and not doing chiropractic stuff, try to be present with yourself, present with your family, your friends, your loved ones, present with nature and God, if that's important to you. Um, and then, yeah, communication, connection. So I know you've been great communicating with me and back and forth. So I'm anybody who watches this and wants to reach out to me, you know, look me up on Facebook. We can connect that way, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
yeah. Brilliant. Thanks. I think it's a nice place to end it with a connection. So yeah, what I'll do is people can look you up. I mean, definitely look up the FTCA group. I'd say because you're a mod in there, aren't you?
I'm radical right now. I still get the
Oh,
notification, let people in, so they haven't completely kicked me out yet.
okay.
Uh,
Cool,
I'll
but you're
probably,
pretty active in there. So if people search, your name, Dustin Hauser, in that group, they'll see you as well.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's really key. Is if you got questions, you're struggling, just reach out. Like people can always know they can reach out to me. They can reach out to you if they got questions as well. Um, yeah, brilliant. All right. Well, thanks again for your